So you've well, tell us first of all where you've gone to.
Right, I'm in the High Street in Cricklade now, and I'm outside CBSlade Estate Agent, one of the local estate agencies here. Now, looking in their window, there are about 5 or 6, 7 or 8 properties here, ranging from about 179,000 all the way up to around about $250,000. Now, the thing is, they don't actually say whether any of these properties are repossessed properties. Now, the reason for that, of course, is because if you knew that that property needed repossessing, the chances are you might be able to hammer the estate agent down on price. So, apparently, according to the estate agent, Mark, there aren't any signs here that any of these houses are due to be repossessed.
So, I suppose the question is, Derek, that are mortgage companies taking a hit and trying to resell something for, presumably in this market, less than they loaned out in it on the first place? And if they are, does that mean there are potential bargains to be had?
Well, let me involve the expert here. This is Slade. Now, you obviously run CBSlade here in Cricklade. As far as you're concerned, have you found that the banks are trying to get rid of houses more these days? Because, of course, people aren't buying the repossessed houses, are they?
Well, that's right. I mean, obviously, repossessions are up, as I'm sure you're aware and as you're talking about. And the banks they do have a duty to get the best price for it, but there are more repossessions available. And the other side of it is that there are more people who are trying to dispose of their home before repossession happens.
And what we're quite keen to find out is there seems to be a trend over the last few months of repossessions going down. Is it because people are simply not buying, so the banks themselves and the financial organisations are rather keen to hold on to the property and to help out the mortgage payer, as it were?
Well, I don't know if it's the banks are keen to do that, but certainly the government's putting a lot of pressure on them to do that. We don't want to see people be repossessed, so the building societies, the banks have got a duty to try and stop that. Interestingly, Northern Rock, who are obviously funded by the government, seem to be the most aggressive in terms of getting people repossessed and getting people out of their houses. But a much better solution is for people to live there and to have some sort of solution for them.
Now, of course, we know that Gordon Brown recently announced that he was trying to, as it were, for the first 2 years, underwrite any mortgage payments. Have you seen that has helped people stay in their own homes at this time?
Well, we've got people who need to sell their properties. If they don't, within a period of time, they will be repossessed. But they do seem to be receiving the assistance. You don't stop paying your mortgage 1 month and get turfed out the next.
Well, how long does it take? You know, if you were made redundant, should we say, and you didn't pay the mortgage for 3 months, would the bank start proceedings to try and take your house, unless the government steps in? You can use one of these schemes.
Well, it's very much up to the individual banks and building societies what they do, but realistically, you know, we're seeing times of people being in their properties for more than a year or so. If there's children involved, the courts will look at it very favourably, but it's not a quick process. But the solution is to speak to your lender as soon as possible. Don't just stop paying the mortgage. Deal with it before it happens and instruct a good local agent to sell the property for you. It will be in your best interest to sell it yourself rather than to have it repossessed.
Because I was going to ask this, because surely if a bank wants to take your property off you, they want to get rid of it as quick as possible. So do repossessed houses, do they, because at the end of the day, the bank's owning the deeds at the time that you take out on the mortgage. Are you finding that the banks are just wanting to get rid of the property and knock the price down as much as possible? Because you and I, if your homes are repossessed, we would have a little bit of equity in that. Do the banks take that into consideration for you as the customer?
Well, the bank's duty is to get you the most amount they can for the property. In practice, they'll go around and ask some estate agent what price does this house need to be to sell it in 4 weeks. The estate agent knows it's a bank, they know they can come in with a lower figure to get it on at a realistic price to sell it. It will go for less than if you sell it privately yourself. Plus, you've got to take into account the fees and all the additions that the bank will add as well. So clearly the advice would be to speak to your lender as soon as possible and then to get the house sold yourself rather than getting to a position where you're being repossessed.
But of course banks themselves are causing some of the bottleneck, aren't they? Because if your home is repossessed, they will want to sell your house, but of course nobody's buying houses now because they can't get mortgages from the bank who has repossessed your house.
Exactly, and if you can answer that one, then that would be great.
Well, I'm asking you, what's the answer to that then?
Well, banks have got to have a bit more confidence in lending again. Unfortunately, a lot of people have mortgages that maybe they shouldn't have had, and I think that's where the problem comes. But to fix that now is difficult. Banks do have to start lending more so that we can have more buyers. Whilst there aren't lots of buyers, the buyers that know which houses have been repossessed will be after a bargain, and they'll make those low offers, and they may well get it accepted if the bank walks away with enough money, unfortunately.
Okay, one final question. Obviously, the houses that you've had to deal with that have been repossessed, do you tend to get better deals from homes that aren't repossessed? You know, is it a bargain basement to buy a to buy a repossessed house?
I think that's the, everyone always thinks that. People come in and register looking only for repossessions. Yes, repossessions will probably offer good value for money, but there's lots of other properties out there that offer equally good value for money, where people are just disposing of their homes themselves. So you don't need to only look for repossessions. There are bargains out there. Come and talk to us. We'll tell you which ones they are.
Okay, Chris and Slade from CBSlade here in Cricklade. Thank you for joining us. So there we go, Mark. It seems that the market is suppressed at the moment. It's not necessarily the case that repossessed homes are a bargain, but of course, once you've found a home, even if it's a repossessed home that you want, you then try getting a mortgage.
Derek, thank you very much indeed.